Thank you for having me. Um, I'll surprise you, I'm not coming from the open source space till I got the mandate to be in charge of the UN Open Source Conference. And I remember that day when they, at the United Nations, I've been asked to take the lead on the open source conference, the UN Open Source Conference. I start asking myself, why me? Meaning this is something that is not for the UN. This is not something for me. There's so many prestigious conferences at the UN, nuclear, disarmament, development conferences. Why only the open source to me? Is that a punishment? And then I quickly realized that put in a context, the open source was one of common vertical access that could align on the three main objectives of the UN on the United Nations. Why do we have the UN? Mainly for three main purposes. Firstly is to ensure development, global development. Secondly, to enforce human rights across the globe. And third is for peace and security. And these three main elements come and intersect perfectly with the digital space. And in particular with the open source as a product coming from the digital public goods or the public goods. This is something that we have in common. This is something that we are sharing at the global scale, and we should look at it from the humanity perspective rather than from a single economic perspective. So I took that the role with patience, and I'll go through the history of the open source, which is quite new at the United Nations, and the importance the open source is taking now at these international forums. Let me just say that the UN also was created post the Second World War, and the purpose of the UN was to ensure that there is no Third World War, bringing 193 member states to talk to each other. I let you imagine if we try to get 193 persons today to talk to each other and to make a common agreement, that will be more than difficult, if not impossible. So imagine if we are doing that at the level of member states. So we have 193 countries. The United Nations is simply the forum where all these member states come together to talk to each other, to avoid going into the Third World War, or to set up common goals, common objectives together. That's literally the role of the UN today. It's literally to enable this exchange and to facilitate the dialogue among the different member states. One things emerged during the election and the mandate of our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, was the digital impact and the digital importance on the role of the UN. And at the early beginning of his mandate, he realized that we have nothing in the digital space when it comes to these 193 member states. We have no single agreement. We don't know how to take it forwards for the humanity. And among others, we released the roadmap to global digital, digital roadmap, this is the name, in 2018. And one of the targets was creating 1 million digital champions for sustainable development goals by 2030. The digital development goals are the core mandate of the UN. This is our objective. We work and agree together on common principles related to different development goals that could lead the humanity to a better future. And we realized quickly that to achieve these development goals, we need at least 1 million digital champions and all their networks, because the digital will be the main mean to advance on our sustainable development goals. For that purpose, and to advance on these creation and vision on the digital, there was a big momentum last year at the United Nations during the Summit of the Future, and the name is the Global Digital Compact. We, as United Nations, we have facilitated negotiation among the 193 member states to get a common agreement on a set of goals ruling the digital cooperation in the globe. So that today we have a clear vision on how we, as member states and different countries, will collaborate together to advance on the digital and to make advancement on the Sustainable Development Goals. The Global Digital Compact is the truly, and I take the words of the Secretary General, the truly global framework for digital cooperation, and the first. Till today, we operate, all the member states operate without a global framework. What is the framework about? Mainly, if we pick the most important pieces regarding the digital space, we have these 6 goals. And then if we read the SDG, if we read the Global Digital Compact, we see some commitment coming from the different member states to develop, disseminate, and maintain cooperation, safe and secure open source software. So it's a commitment from 193 members to enhance, to accelerate the development of open source, open data, and open AI. These 3 are coming together, and the open standards as a whole. So this is the first commitment that we received, and then everyone on the globe today agree on that statement to promote the adoption of open standards and interoperability to facilitate the use of digital public goods. Digital public goods are these elements of software and AI that could be used by anyone on the globe, and that ensures security, trust, fairness, equity, and accessibility. We have also agreed on inclusivity of safeguards. The safeguards are the way to protect the human rights within the digital space, to exchange and make publicly available the best practices. And I think this is much more related to the open knowledge and open science, to increase the investment towards the development of digital public goods, which is the name that we have put on the open source products that could be used, publicly used, and to reinforce the usage of digital public infrastructure, which mainly are the way we are changing the government and digitalizing the government today. And finally, to encourage the formation of partnership. And that's principally why today I'm very happy to be here and to see all this enthusiasm for the open source, and to see how to commit to further partnership with all of you and with the the excellent GOSIM team. Beyond the global effort being done at the global level for the humanity and for these general agreements, within the UN, we realized also that we need to start looking at the open source as a drive to the change and the digital transformation of the United Nations as an organization as a whole. And then we've adopted an open source strategy, which is based on a very common strategy that we can find it in any big organization: drafting policy, awareness and internal culture, and the tech stack that should be developed inside of the UN that could lead to acceleration of open source adoption, that could reduce the cost of the digital transformation inside of the UN. I'll let you know that the UN is a very big and a huge organization with many other affiliated international organizations, member of the United Nations. We agreed together, most of us, that we will chair and we will work together towards making our software being developed reusable by other internal organizations. For the moment, it's not open for the external. And then we've built this open source foundation and vision within the UN for building a clear strategy and roadmap to have the OSPO, or they have the open source strategy internal to the UN as a global commitment for 2032. To do that, we got the mission to build the open source principles. Open source principles as of the United Nations. These are not only internal principles, although it was done with an internal working group at the UN. These are general principles, and they are open to external stakeholders to endorse these principles. So we have 8 principles: open by default, contribute back, secure by design, foster inclusive participation, design for reusability, provide documentation, recognize, incentivize, support, and empower, and finally, sustain and scale. These are today the only UN or the global level open source principles that are admitted to bring a first layer of governance at the open source at the global layer. I invite all of you, big companies, small companies, open source stakeholders in China, to endorse the open source principles. They are open to endorsement. And I'll be happy to see more endorsement coming from this part of the world. I admit that we have fewer stakeholders coming from China at the endorsement process of the UN open source principles. I'll be glad to discuss it further at any moment with you if you would like, but this is the direct access to the endorsement. Third part of the open source at the UN is the newly established UN Open Source Week or conference. This is some pictures from 2025, the most recent. We got offered the prestigious ECOSOC room, which is one of the biggest room of the UN, mostly for political discussion. And for once, we got this discussion happening at technical level rather than at political level. And the conference is an annual conference. We are thinking about Asia edition to happen. And we'll be happy to come to China or wherever else in Asia for the United Nations Open Source Conference, Asia. It grew very quickly. This 2025 is the third edition. The first edition was with 120 attendees. The second edition with 800 attendees. This year we got 1,000 and plus attendees from 75 countries, 2,500 remote viewers, and we got 600 plus side events organized during that conference. Most of these side events are out of our control because we don't know exactly what is happening, but many of them, we have a visibility on them, and then when we've tried to make that count, we have seen that there is a big momentum happening at the global level, attracting more and more attendees, and there is a strong interest in getting the discussion, not only at the policy level at the UN, but also at the technical layer. This is a map of the attendance by country for the conference of this year, and I'm sad to see that Asia is very poorly represented. I hope that next year we have much more attendees from China and also from East Asia and the Pacific. We have very few attendees, mostly are from the US because of the convenience. It was done in New York, but promise, we will think about Asia edition and relocating in Asia. Thanks to our sponsors, these are our sponsors, some of you are here, some are not here, but this is a conference that are also being hosted by member states, so by countries that admit that the open source is becoming very important. This year conference was hosted by Sri Lanka, Kenya, Germany, Republic Dominica, and Italy. Finally, and then the future of open source projects that we are leading today at the Office for Digital and Emerging Technology at the Secretariat is to talk a little bit further with government and member states. I think that there is a strong awareness among the private sectors. There is a strong awareness among our researchers and scientific community. It's time to bring more incentives to the government, and this is where we are heading towards an open source hub to be developed at the UN with capacity building activity, capacity of building OSPOs in different member states, and bringing more open source policy advocacy at that level. Thank you so much for hearing me.